This all started when an immigrant arrived from South Africa to North America with a head full of ideas and an obsession with the future. A few decades later, he builds rockets, electric cars, and has come to be one of the most polarizing personal brands on Earth. But buried in the story of Elon Musk is a quieter, stranger subplot about a forgotten beach town called Boca Chica at the edge of Texas, a place with no post office, no mayor, and in hindsight at least, no idea what was coming until it was already too late. So how did Elon, one of the richest and most controversial figures alive, take over an entire American town? What happened to the people who lived there? And how did a dream of Mars become a flashpoint in American politics? Stay tuned to find out as we uncover the fascinating story of Elon Musk's Starbase and the town it replaced. I'm your host, Ryan Socash, and you're watching It's History. This episode is sponsored by Delete Me. Imagine all of your personal information, name, addresses, or phone number, being publicly exposed without your consent. Well, unfortunately, this is the reality for over 100 million Americans due to a recent massive data breach, and if that concerns you, you're not alone. With threats like this growing daily, protecting our data online is more crucial than ever. That's where our sponsor, Delete Me, comes in. Delete Me helps you remove your personal information from data brokers' databases, which otherwise sell your information to anyone willing to pay a few dollars for it. This type of privacy concern doesn't just expose you to identity theft, it also puts you at risk for personal attacks based on your political views or even your profession. I'm sure you all know what I'm talking about here. We've all heard those stories about people being harassed or scammed because of their information, which is readily available online. So what can you do about it? Well, Delete Me is a solution. It's a service that deletes your personal information like names, addresses, and phone numbers from the sites where data brokers store it. But here's the best part. Delete Me doesn't just remove your data once. It keeps monitoring these sites to ensure that your information does not resurface. This has helped me so much. As a content creator, I need to be extra careful with the personal information that I share online. And thanks to Delete Me, I've removed old listings like addresses and other personal data from over 100 sites that I didn't even previously know about. So now I feel much safer knowing that my information is being protected. So get 20% off Delete Me US consumer plans when you go to joindeleteme.com/Socash and use promo code Socash at checkout. Before SpaceX claimed it as the future of interplanetary travel, this land that they'd eventually come to possess had already lived many lives, though quietly and mostly forgotten. This stretch of land on the Gulf Coast, where Boca Chica would eventually rise, existed in near total obscurity, windswept, marshy, and sitting just a few feet above sea level. It wasn't the kind of place that most people sought out, but that didn't mean it was unoccupied or unimportant. For thousands of years, indigenous people moved across the southern reaches of what is now Texas, adapting to the coastal environment in ways that left few permanent traces. Archaeological evidence points to seasonal hunting and fishing by groups like the Karolina, who were known for their adaptability and also for their resistance to the colonies. While these communities didn't build cities or leave monumental architecture, their connection to the land was deep. They understood its rhythms in a way that modern developers a century later largely did not. By the time the Spanish colonists began pressing deeper into the region during the 18th century, much of the Gulf Coast remained rugged and unclaimed in any practical sense. The land shifted hands on paper from Spain to Mexico and eventually to the Republic of Texas. But still, its actual development was sparse. The terrain was challenging. Hurricanes were common, and soil didn't exactly scream agricultural promise. Still, after Texas joined the U.S. in 1845, small settlements began to dot the coastline. These were places built more on grit than glamour. The promise of fishing access and isolation drew in settlers looking to start over or to completely disappear. Railroads and cattle trails passed far to the north, whereas industry focused inland or around major ports like Houston or Galveston. In other words, this patch of land remained untouched, unwanted, and quietly enduring. After the Civil War, Texas entered a long period of reinvigoration. Ranching surged, ports expanded, and the Gulf Coast slowly filled in with settlements catering to fishing, shipping, and eventually oil. Amid that growth, a small community emerged near the Rio Grande Delta, quiet, remote, and perched on the southernmost edge of Texas. The town was never meant to be a destination. It was more like a leftover, a small residual cluster born out of land speculation, fishery access, and proximity to the Mexican border. The kind of place you ended up in, not the kind of place you moved in with ambition. Still, people made lives there. Veterans and laborers settled alongside seasonal workers. Some came for the fishing, others for privacy. The economy never boomed, but for decades the town endured on sustenance, retirement income, and a trickle of tourist traffic, mostly birdwatchers and beachgoers drawn to the surrounding and quiet wetlands. What really defined the town, though, was what it lacked: infrastructure. No schools, no hospitals, not even a post office. It existed in a kind of legal and logistical twilight, unincorporated, minimally governed, and mostly forgotten. But its isolation was part of its charm, though that charm was tested repeatedly. Hurricanes battered the coastline, and some residents chose not to rebuild. Developers eyed the area sporadically, envisioning ports, energy facilities, or even liquid nitrified gas terminals at one point, but nothing stuck. Nothing, that is, until a different kind of visionary showed up. In the early 2000s, long before SpaceX broke ground, another industrial figure had scoped out that same stretch of land with plans of transformation. The port potential, the open skies, and the buffer from urban life had appeal, but the political will and financial backing just weren't there. Years later, when Elon Musk came calling, that town still looked like a blank slate. That's what made it so attractive. So while most of the world overlooked the town, Elon Musk saw something else: launch potential. But to understand why that mattered, we need to understand him. Elon Musk was born in Pretoria, South Africa, in 1971, long before he became the most polarizing man in the world of technology. From the beginning, he didn't fit in. While other kids were chasing sports or social status, Elon was nose deep in encyclopedias, coding manuals, and science fiction. Apparently, he read The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy and took it seriously. Life, he concluded, should be about solving meaningful problems. He was intensely bright, but intensely awkward, recalling, quote, "I had trouble picking up social cues. I was just thinking about the future constantly." It's also been considered that there's something deeper behind this awkwardness. In fact, on one occasion, though satirically, Musk admitted to being on the autism spectrum, specifically Asperger's syndrome, something revealed on SNL of all places, where he also stated, quote, "I reinvented electric cars and I'm sending people to Mars in a rocket ship. Did you think I was going to be a chill, normal dude?" His childhood wasn't easy. He described his father as being a difficult man, brilliant but emotionally abusive. At school, Musk was bullied so badly that he was once thrown down a flight of stairs and hospitalized. But the adversity didn't break him, it focused him. At 12, Musk created a solid, basic computer game called Blaster. He wasn't just dreaming about technology, he was building it. But even then, South Africa felt too small for the future that he envisioned. So at 17, he moved to Canada with nothing but a student visa and a vague plan. He attended Queen's University, later transferring to the University of Pennsylvania, where he earned dual degrees in economics and physics. By the 1990s, Musk was in Silicon Valley at the exact moment the dot-com boom was changing the world. His first major company, Zip2, sold for $307 million. Then came X.com, which became PayPal. That deal netted him $180 million, and he poured almost all of it into three ventures that many assumed were doomed: Tesla, SpaceX, and SolarCity. All three succeeded wildly, but it didn't happen overnight. SpaceX in particular looked like a catastrophic misstep. After 3 failed rocket launches and the evaporation of nearly all his money, Musk was down to one last shot. If that rocket failed, it was over, but it didn't. The Falcon 1 reached orbit on its 4th try, and then everything changed. NASA noticed, contracts followed, as did a wave of technological firsts: reusable rockets, private satellite constellations, as well as plans of colonizing Mars. But Musk wasn't chasing novelty. He was chasing necessity. As recalled during his TED Talk, quote, "The window for becoming a multiplanetary species may not be open for long," he told TED. Continuing, quote, "We have to move fast, and we have to move with ambition." In that context, SpaceX needed a launch site that wasn't just remote. It had to be free. Free from congestion, airspace, crowded coastlines, and federal micromanagement. Florida had served its purpose. California was too constrained. What Musk needed was a blank slate. At the same time, Musk was becoming more than just an entrepreneur. He was becoming a force, the man behind Tesla, Neuralink, the Boring Company, and OpenAI. A disruptor of transportation, energy, and public discourse. He was not just building companies. He was redefining what was possible. And all that ambition needed room to grow. That's when he found this barren stretch of land near the Gulf. Coastal, isolated, nearly forgotten. The kind of place that hadn't changed much in half a century. It wasn't the first time someone had eyed it for industry, but it would be the last. The town had no idea what was coming. And by the time the rockets arrived, the takeover had already begun. By early 2019, the build-out of Starbase was in full swing. The flat, windswept terrain that had once housed fishing shacks and snowbirds was now home to massive infrastructure, launch towers, methane tanks, prototype assembly hangars, and a bustling crew of engineers, fabricators, and technicians. The centerpiece was the Starship, a next-generation rocket designed to carry humans and cargo, not just into orbit, but to the moon and eventually Mars. The first test flights were as dramatic as the goals. In August 2019, SpaceX successfully launched its test vehicle, Starhopper, which at this point traveled several hundred feet into the air before landing vertically. A small but critical proof of concept, but this was just the beginning. In 2020, multiple Starship prototypes were built and tested on site. Some ended in fireballs, others came tantalizingly close to perfection. The SN8 flight in December of 2020 managed a controlled ascent and aerodynamic descent before exploding upon landing. Still, Musk declared this a success. Starbase was no longer theoretical. It was a stage, and Elon Musk was the showrunner. The site began drawing media, fans, engineers, influencers, and even politicians. Each explosion was live-streamed, with drone footage, countdowns, and cheering SpaceX staff, becoming a kind of spectacle of space. But as the rockets got taller, the backlash grew louder. Environmental groups raised alarms about Starbase's proximity to protected wetlands and wildlife habitats. Boca Chica Beach, a public right under Texas law, was routinely closed during tests. In 2021, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service expressed concern about the frequency and impact of launches. Meanwhile, SpaceX was requesting waivers from the FAA to fast-track development. Musk, increasingly active on Twitter, didn't exactly hide his frustrations. He posted, sometimes sarcastically, about bureaucracy, red tape, and what he saw as unnecessary government interference. According to some internal reports, SpaceX complained that launch delays were costing millions per day. By 2022, things had escalated. Musk publicly threatened to move Starship development to Florida if environmental restrictions weren't loosened, stating, quote, "If we don't get approval soon, we'll have to shift operations." He didn't, but the message was clear. Then came 2023, a turning point, not just for Starbase, but for Musk himself. That April, the first fully stacked Starship launched from Starbase, clearing the tower before losing control and detonating mid-flight. It was a partial success, a technical failure, and a global headline. The FAA grounded Starbase pending investigation. Environmental groups sued, and SpaceX, as usual, kept building. By now, Musk's reputation had evolved into something far more contentious. His $44 billion acquisition of Twitter in late 2022 had pulled him deep into culture war territory. He posted memes, fired employees, and reinstated controversial figures. And politically, he shifted right, sharply. In 2023, Musk began publicly criticizing President Biden, the Department of Justice, and what many saw as anti-innovative policies. This was all amplified as he started appearing on very popular podcasts, openly hinting that the federal government was trying to, quote, slow down spaceflight through regulation. As the 2024 election approached, Musk wasn't just reacting, he was actively shaping the narrative. He accused the government of targeting him for political reasons, while at the same time, some Republican lawmakers began echoing those same claims, positioning SpaceX as a symbol of private enterprise under siege. All of this chaos bled into Starbase. The rockets were still launching, but the symbolism had changed for many. For critics, it was a billionaire playground protected by lax oversight. For supporters, it was American exceptionalism made manifest, bold, dangerous, and unfazed by bureaucracy. And through it all, Boca Chica, now Starbase, kept changing. Structures expanded, access tightened, and what little remained of the original village faded further into the background. By 2024, Starbase wasn't just a launch site, it was a lightning rod, and Musk had made sure everyone was watching. By 2024, Starbase had become more than a test site. It was a symbol, and Elon Musk had positioned himself squarely at the center of its meaning. That year, politics and space collided more directly than ever. Musk, now deeply engaged in the national discourse, framed Starbase as the battleground for innovation against government overreach. And all along the way, he made no secret of his alignments. Yes, Donald Trump visited. A former president at the time, he toured Starbase as a part of his 2024 campaign, praising Musk and reportedly witnessing one of the suborbital test firings firsthand. This moment was broadcast across media channels worldwide, reflecting a fusion of Trump-era bravado and Musk's industrial spectacle. Two branding giants, each feeding each other's momentum. To supporters, it was a vision of America's future, privatized, powerful, and unafraid to take risks. Though to critics, it looked like a tech baron wrapping national infrastructure in personal ideology. So, what do we make of Starbase? Is it a new frontier? A privately built Cape Canaveral of the modern era? Or is it a warning, a glimpse of what happens when ambition and wealth meet in unregulated space, in a town where rockets now rise where porches once stood? I somehow doubt we'll reach a consensus on those questions, but it should make for interesting conversation. Share your thoughts in the comments section below. Otherwise, I thank you for watching, and until next time, I'm Ryan Socash, signing off.